Before sharing this chapter of my life with you, I want to ask something from the bottom of my heart. Subscribe to this channel right now, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone you love. My story is raw, it's real, and it may touch someone who needs to hear it today. I have lived through love, betrayal, illness, addiction, and rebirth. My journey took me from the depths of despair to the quiet beauty of finding peace within myself. And today, I'm opening this up to you. No filters, no masks. I still remember a phrase that echoed in my mind. When all other voices are silent and in the stillness, we wait before Him. The silence of the soul makes God's voice clearer. I knew I needed to be still, because my life had always been full of noise, agitation, and chaos. I am the daughter of a Northeastern mother and a father from São Paulo. My grandparents came to São Paulo as Northeastern migrants, seeking a better life. Among the children was my mother, still very young. They restarted their lives there, looking for work, something São Paulo offers in abundance. My mother started working very early. In Pernambuco, she worked in the fields. In São Paulo, she worked to help her siblings, my grandmother, and to support the family. In her teenage years, she met my father. They went out, enjoyed nightlife, and eventually she became pregnant with my older sister, still in her teens. 3 years later, I was born. Another 3 years later, my brother was born. When my mother was about 25 or 26, she already had 3 children. My father worked with artesian wells, traveling all the time. My mother was a housemaid and had to take care of us while dealing with his absence, and she eased the pain and fatigue with alcohol. I grew up with an alcoholic mother, a chemical dependency that marked my childhood. It was hard, very hard. We lived in constant apprehension, never knowing what might happen at any moment. She drank more or less every other day, and we carried shame and fear. Sometimes friends would knock on the door to ask us to play, and we would hide. We were ashamed. My mother wasn't the type of alcoholic who just stayed quiet. She lost her coordination, and many times we had to carry her to bed. My childhood dream wasn't going to Disney or having toys. It was simply for my mother to stop drinking. There were also good moments, music and parties. My father liked samba, sometimes country music, and I learned to dance samba with him. But these joyful moments were always mixed with the insecurity and pain caused by my mother's alcoholism. When I was about 15, my mother stopped drinking. But before that, at 13 or 14, I had my first boyfriend. It was a short relationship. One Friday, I was at home getting ready to see him when a friend knocked on the door and said, "I need to tell you something. Something happened to our friend." At first, I thought it wasn't serious, but he told me my boyfriend had crashed his car on my Radioleste Avenue in São Paulo and died instantly. He passed away on January 11th. I don't remember if it was in 1991 or 1992, and he was buried the next day on what would have been his 18th birthday. That became a turning point in my life. I always say, what do you do with the lemons life gives you? Alcoholism at home was the first lemon. This was the second. I had no faith or religion at that time. His family was Spiritist and said he had communicated with them after death. It was the era of the movie Ghost, so my imagination went far. But my uncles had joined a church and began explaining to me about death according to their faith. This brought me comfort. I started attending the religious community and felt welcomed. It eased my anguish and despair. Sometime later, I met the man who would become my future husband. We met at his brother's wedding, introduced by a mutual friend from church. We started talking, and everything moved quickly. We got together on September 4th, 1994, and 20 days later, we were officially dating. I was his first girlfriend. Our dating was nice, but at the same time, there were things I didn't like. I wanted more affection, and he wasn't a very affectionate person. He had never received it, so he didn't know how to give it. We went out, had fun, but I always thought, and after marriage, will it be like this too? Even with those doubts, I was very much in love. Today, I understand it was emotional dependency. During our relationship, he decided to go to college in another city to become a pastor in our church. It was a 4-year program, and we started a long-distance relationship, seeing each other only on weekends or every other week. It was hard. I was 17, he was 20. We communicated mostly through letters. I kept boxes of them. Over time, I missed him so much that I decided to go there to study as well. I had finished teacher training, got a scholarship for pedagogy, and moved. But on campus, I realized I was only there because of him. I didn't really want to study that, so I went back home. There was a period when we broke up, and although he never openly admitted it, everything indicated there had been infidelity. I felt he was different, more distant. I saw the signs, but I didn't want to face them. It was too painful to admit, so I stayed. Later, he came back to me, and we got back together. It was fast. In September, we reunited. In December 1999, we got engaged, and we married on the 19th of that same month. Before the wedding, the other woman reached out to him, saying she loved him and begging to get back together. He told me, but we went ahead with the wedding plans. I had never dreamed of getting married or becoming a mother. My dream was always to be an independent, professionally accomplished woman. But I got married because I was in love. Our wedding was simple. We had no furniture, and I made much of the party's decoration myself. On the day, I woke up early to clean the hall, with curlers in my hair, while friends helped. It was all improvised, without money, but with effort and love. The first year was wonderful. I greatly admired his intelligence and speaking skills. I loved hearing him preach and attending his lectures. We went out, talked, and I learned a lot by his side. But over time, insecurities began to appear. I was very jealous, and it bothered him. On a trip, he said, "This isn't going to work." That struck me. I sought therapy to work on that trait, and improved a lot. I taught morning and afternoon classes, and felt professionally fulfilled. I was happy with myself, until in 2002, I began to feel severe stomach pains. At first, it only happened when I drank something acidic like soda or passion fruit juice. I postponed going to the doctor, thinking I'd wait until my July vacation to avoid missing work. But in early 2003, the pain got so bad that I would lie curled up between desks in my classroom to endure it. I went to the doctor, had several tests, endoscopy, abdominal ultrasound, and kept working while waiting for the results. One day, the hospital called me, which was unusual. I called my mother and asked her to pray because something serious must have happened. At the appointment, the doctor asked if I was married, if I had children, and then said directly, "You have gastric adenocarcinoma, stomach cancer, and you need to have your stomach completely removed within 15 days. I didn't even know it was possible to live without a stomach. The ground fell from under me. I was only 26 years old. He was by my side at that moment and gave me support. Those were days of fear and anxiety. Before surgery, I had already lost 2 kilos. We prepared for everything, and on the day, I put my life in God's hands. I spent 8 days in the hospital with a nasogastric tube, being fed directly through the intestine. The pain was intense, especially in my back, but there was also much love from family, friends, and even my students. Deep down, I had a hidden fear. If I ever got sick, would he still love me? During this process, he was very supportive. I was discharged and started a liquid and pureed diet. I lost a total of 10 kilo, weighing only 48 kilos. The oncologist recommended radiation and chemotherapy to reduce the chance of recurrence, since my case was rare for someone so young and without a history of smoking or drinking. He didn't want me to do it, argued with the doctor, but I decided on my own to go ahead. There were many radiation and chemo sessions, Monday through Friday. Over time, I got very sick. I couldn't eat properly, lost more weight, became depressed, and extremely weak. I asked him to take me to the hospital, saying, "I feel like I'm dying." I was admitted with a completely suppressed immune system, placed in reverse isolation, receiving white blood cells through my navel. My veins were necrotized from the chemo. The pain from the injections was unbearable. They decided to place a catheter, but punctured my lung, causing a pneumothorax. I weighed 38 kilos. My hair started falling out. Still, I tried to take care of my appearance, did my eyebrows, wore hair clips. One night, wanting to be discharged, I woke up with my hands and mouth twisted, a paralysis that left me unable to walk. I was put in a wheelchair. They ran many tests but found nothing. They suspected a lack of vitamin B12. I was discharged fragile, without a diagnosis, but with my body marked by surgeries, without a stomach, part of the esophagus, part of the intestine, and later without a gallbladder. I joked that I was like the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, but with a beating heart. I went home, and he shaved my head at my request. I started wearing scarves. We went to a park, and I dared to go without covering my head, but our relationship was already strained. After this period, he requested a transfer to a coastal town, believing that a calmer place could help my recovery and that we could start over. We moved in 2014 and were warmly welcomed by the local church community. I began regaining my physical health, returned to the gym, my hair grew back, and everything seemed to be getting back on track. But during the cancer period, we had already discussed separation. We decided to try to stay together. After all, we were a pastoral couple, and see how far we could go. In the new city, we moved into a dream house, large, comfortable, something I had never had as a child, when we lived in simple houses, often with leaks when it rained. We bought a golden retriever puppy, Atos, who became like a son to me. He helped me a lot in my emotional recovery. It was during this time that we met a family from the church, a young woman, her mother, and an aunt. At first, they were very affectionate with us, but over time, I noticed they began to distance themselves from me, but not from him. On the contrary, they kept seeking him out, asking for help, calling him, and he would go to their house to bring food. Baskets or pray with them. I started finding it strange, but didn't want to create conflict. Until I noticed that at night or in the afternoon, when I went out to visit people, his phone would be off or go straight to voicemail. Again, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Meanwhile, I didn't return to teaching. I was still fragile and wanted to fully recover. So I decided to invest in an old dream: painting. Since childhood, I had drawn and painted, but never had the time to dedicate myself to it. I started taking classes and painting for hours in the glass-walled room of our house, surrounded by nature. It was therapeutic. It healed my soul. Still, I felt discomfort in the relationship. There was distance, especially in physical intimacy. I sensed he might not be attracted to me anymore, and that hurt. At the same time, he had nice gestures, like making breakfast for me every day. But his physical presence didn't erase the emotional silence. As a pastoral couple, it felt like there was a silent pact not to touch certain subjects that could make us face the fact that our marriage was falling apart. We moved houses often. During our 12-year relationship, nearly 7 of them married, we changed addresses about 5 times. It was in the last move, to a new townhouse, that things began to collapse for good. In 2005, this young woman from the church had a fight with her mother and left home. She ended up on the highway, and he, as a pastor, went after her to bring her back. He brought her to our house, and she slept in the guest room. The next day, he made her breakfast and took her to the bus stop. In my mind, it was just pastoral help. But over time, I noticed odd situations. We were traveling, and suddenly she called him collect. I, as his wife, didn't even do that. I found it strange but stayed silent. In 2005 and 2006, our relationship became more and more distant. Until one day, already living in the new townhouse, I left the ceiling fan on when I went to sleep. The next day, he had a disproportionate outburst about it. I thought it was very strange. Shortly after, my father called me and asked if everything was okay in my marriage. I said yes, that he was a good man, hardworking. But my father replied, "A relationship isn't just that. Is everything really okay?" That stuck in my mind. I was already determined to go back to school and study psychology in São Paulo. I would attend classes during the week and come home on weekends. But during that time, I got pregnant. When I told him, he didn't react well. I was hurt. I continued the pregnancy, but at 8 weeks, I miscarried. Despite the pain, I focused on my studies. Our relationship seemed to find a certain balance, until August 31st, 2006. After lunch, I sat at the computer to work on school assignments. He came up and asked, "What are you going to do with your life?" I replied that I wanted to graduate, get a master's degree, and teach at a university. Then he said, "This will be my last year as a pastor." I asked why. He replied, "Because I fell, and she's pregnant." In that moment, I already knew who he was talking about. I stood up, went to the bedroom, and fell to the floor, on my knees, screaming and crying uncontrollably. It was as if all the air had been sucked from my body. When I heard those words, "She's pregnant," my world collapsed. In a single instant, I lost everything. My sense of home, marriage, work, city, religion. And I had no emotional strength to handle it, especially after spending 3 years recovering from cancer. The next day, I had a medical evaluation scheduled. I called close friends, including one who was my maid of honor, and told them what had happened. They comforted me. I went to a bar with them, cried a lot, had a shot of tequila, and ordered a plate of pastel. The waiter tried to comfort me, saying, "Everything passes." But inside, it felt like nothing would ever pass. The next day, at the medical appointment, I broke down, again. I told the doctor, who said she had gone through something similar, and she allowed me to extend my leave. But the pain was unbearable. That Thursday, I called my mother, who lived in São Paulo, and said, "He cheated on me, and I'm going to kill myself." I hung up the phone and took an entire pack of Black Label medication. By God's mercy, my mother managed to contact my friend, who reached out to him. He arrived quickly, took me to the hospital, and the doctor said, "She's going to get what she wanted." But by a miracle, I survived. Even so, I spent a week completely disconnected from reality. My mother-in-law came to take care of me, but I couldn't find meaning in continuing. I tried again to end my life, this time by hypothermia, going into the sea at night. He pulled me out. It was a pain I wanted to silence at any cost. I had lived for him, and now my life seemed to have no purpose. I asked several times to go to her house. When we finally went, her mother and the young woman herself confirmed everything. They showed me photos of the two together, as if they were a couple. In one of them, he was hugging her from behind at a party. I looked at her and said, "I hope one day you feel what I'm feeling right now." I left there destroyed. Even after everything, because I was so in love and so emotionally attached, I began to create stories in my head to justify staying with him. I thought, I'll raise this child as if it were my own. We'll move to another city. No, one needs to know anything. But deep down, I knew there was no way. On September 13th, 2006, I packed my things. He paid for a small truck to take everything to the house of friends who welcomed me. I left, but I left still in love, still seeing only his good qualities and ignoring the shadows. He believed that, in time, the dust would settle and we would get back together. But that's not what happened. I began looking at other men, becoming interested in other people. When he noticed, he used it as an argument to say I was cheating on him. And for him, that was the final straw. I had to go to the board of the institution where he worked to formalize the separation. I didn't want to expose what had happened because I thought, he's going to have a child. He needs to provide. And if even Jesus knew Judas was the traitor and didn't expose him, it's not going to be me who does. When they asked the reason for the separation, I simply said, I never loved. And I left carrying that weight with me. After that, I tried to ease the pain in other ways. I began drinking more and more, going out to nightclubs, throwing myself into nightlife. Daytime was for sleeping, drugged on medication. Nighttime was for drinking and trying to forget. I dropped out of college, something I regret to this day. For years, I lived like that. I went out all dressed up, put a lot of effort into my appearance, always in high heels, makeup, hair flawless. Any man I wanted to be with, I was. But inside, it was an endless void. I spent 12 years submerged in alcoholism. I threw myself into the nightlife, clubs, bars, always searching for something to fill a void that never seemed to be filled. Between one relationship and another, nothing was ever healthy. I would fall in love quickly but never admit it. I'd hide the feeling and drown it in the bottle. I also started experimenting with drugs. I wanted to try everything. A friend told me that if I used cocaine with alcohol, I wouldn't get drunk. And one night, for the first time, I spent hours snorting and drinking. We slept in the same place, but just as friends. I woke up in the middle of the night with a deep anguish and a voice in my head saying, "Do it. Jump from the 6th floor. End it." I went to the bathroom, knelt down, and began to pray Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. Little by little, I began to calm down, but I continued in that cycle. I drank until I lost control, putting myself in vulnerable situations. I would go out dancing, but I no longer knew when to stop. My body had no limits anymore, and my mind even less. I had relapses and became involved with extremely toxic men, drug addicts, manipulators, even with psychopathic traits. It was as if I had a magnet for that kind of relationship. Because deep down, I was repeating my mother's story. It was like my inner child wanted to save broken men. Until, in 2018, I met a man who fascinated me. But I quickly realized he was trapped in a life of parties, drugs, and women. Even so, I got involved. The relationship ended painfully, and that's when I told myself, enough. January 2018 was the last month I drank. I sought help through therapy, support groups, and spirituality. I understood that I needed to replace the craving for alcohol with something that truly nourished me. That's when art came into my life with full force. When I decided to change my life, I felt I needed a reality check and a place where I could rebuild myself, far from everything and everyone who was pulling me down. So, at the end of 2018, I left the big city and moved to the countryside, into a simple little house surrounded by greenery, silence, and fresh air. In the beginning, it felt strange. I was used to the noise, the lights, the parties, and the rush, and now all I could hear was the singing of birds and the sound of the wind in the trees. But it was there that I began to find myself again. I started waking up early, having coffee, while looking at nature, writing, painting, and, most importantly, talking to God. I began to reclaim who I was before all that emotional chaos. I learned to cook for myself, to enjoy my own company, to dance alone in the living room. I rediscovered simple pleasures that cost nothing but filled me deeply. It was during this period of productive solitude that I began to understand my patterns, my wounds, and to heal from them. I stopped desperately seeking love and began taking care of myself. That's when I realized, when we stop chasing, life begins to bring us what's right. And that's exactly how, without expecting it, I met the man who is now my partner. We didn't meet in clubs or on dating apps. It was at the calmest and most balanced moment of my life. He arrived gently, with respect, and with a patience I had never seen before. And most importantly, he didn't come to complete me, but to walk beside me. Today, I look back and see that all the chaos, all the tears, and even the wrong choices brought me here. Not to say that it was worth suffering, because it didn't have to be so painful, but to understand that it was necessary for me to finally find myself. Today, after everything I've been through, I understand that divorce, loss, addiction, and loneliness were not my end. They were the beginning of a new life. I had to hit rock bottom to realize that the only way out was to look up and start over. If you are going through a divorce, facing an abusive relationship, feeling lost or trapped in an addiction, I want to tell you something. There is life after pain. There is self-love after rejection. There is hope after disappointment. And yes, there is a future where you look back and feel grateful you survived. I learned that before loving someone else, we must first learn to love ourselves, and that it doesn't matter how many times you have to get back up. What matters is that you never stop trying. If this story spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel now, because here we tell real stories. Stories that heal, inspire, and remind us that we are not alone. Like, share, and leave a comment telling your story. Who knows? It might become the next video and help more people find the strength to start over.